In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a context repository of markdown files for your company context, right? So if you're in GTM, or if you're not, but for basically anyone who works at a company, a lot of the context that you feed on LLM is going to be around your company, right? Like, what products do you sell? What are the personas you target? What are frequently asked questions, and so on, right? And oftentimes with an LLM, you're going to have to repeat that context over and over again for every time you want to ask a question, right? Every time you want to use an LLM to brainstorm or to come up with a solution, you're going to have to repeat yourself. That's different in Claude Code setup, because what you can do is you can give it all the context and then tell Claude Code to save them as files so that you don't have to repeat yourself. You can just say, hey, by the way, I already gave you all of this context and it's been saved and stored as a markdown file. Just go and read it, right? And that's what we're doing today. And so the building blocks that we're using are exactly the same, like web research, which you can use in ChatGPT and anywhere else, right? But the difference is that the output of that research now can be saved as a file, which then you can reference using Claude Code, which makes it really, really powerful, and you'll see that. So basically, we're creating something like this today, which is the context repo for the workflow company, which is my company. And I've already created this based on like call transcripts, my landing page content, my LinkedIn content, my, did I say call transcripts already? But my call transcripts with prospects, clients, internal calls, right? Competitive positioning, right? So all that stuff has been fed to create this context repo. So you can see, like, the workflow company is an AI native revenue operations firm that builds bespoke custom go-to-market systems for VC-backed SaaS companies. Like it says, bespoke, right? Well, why is it bespoke? And that's like captured in a different file called narrative, where it says why bespoke matters. Everyone has access to the same AI models. Everyone can buy the same tools. The competitive advantage comes from how you configure them for your specific business. This is why we build custom systems, not templates, why we write code, not just configure tools, why we embed with clients, not just deliver strategy decks, right? So all of this context has been built over the last few months through iterations of call transcripts and other areas where context is generated, and then they are refined and summarized and put into this context file. So we're going to create something like this. We're not going to go to the extent that I've built it for the workflow company, which is automated integrations with our call recorder, LinkedIn content, and our landing page, right? But we'll use some very simple web research to do sort of an 80-20 version of it, right? Like 20% of the effort to get to 80% output for Anthropic as an example, right? Anthropic is the company behind Claude Code. We will use Claude Code to generate this context repo for Anthropic. Great. I just want to show you in my Finder, you can see CC walkthrough Anthropic. This is where we're going to create the context. It's an empty folder right now. So we'll open that in Cursor. We're going to initialize Claude in here. Great. And we're going to start creating context. Before we create the context, I'm going to split this up into two tasks that are sequential. So first, I'm going to do a bunch of research and just generate a bunch of content based on the research. And then I'm going to call Claude Code again to synthesize that research into specific files, right? So the first is just going to say, well, I'll just prompt it. Hey, I want to create a context repository on the company Anthropic, with the context being that I want to help Anthropic with their go-to-market motions. So things like company overview, their products, their pricing, perhaps their personas based on their blogs and FAQs and even products or pricing, maybe the competitive dynamics, their recent news, which often tells us where their focus is, and the way they like to, their voice and tone, their messaging around their products, the sort of macro narrative around the company and what they're building, what their mission is. Let's spin up a bunch of sub-agents to go out into the web and do research on all of these points that I just mentioned. And then what they'll do is create a research dump. It doesn't have to be super structured right now. So let's create a folder called research in this repo and create a bunch of markdown files based on all of the different areas of research that I just mentioned. And we will dump that in there, and then you and I will work together to refine that research into an actual usable set of markdown files that specifically talk about maybe like the company overview, the products, the personas that they go after, and so on and so forth. So step one, research. I mentioned a bunch of stuff to you. Is there anything else that I overlooked that you think we should consider doing research on, again in the context of go-to-market? Great. So what I did was obviously ask Claude, hey, what else do you have, right? Go-to-market channels, partnership ecosystems. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. And yeah, make sure to run the sub-agents in parallel to cut down the time for research. All right, so this whole research process is going to take some time, but it's going to require minimal oversight from my end. And what might end up happening is like the research, the first pass isn't good enough, but as we're building out the files, the actual repo files, context files, we can send more agents out into the web at that point to really like round out the research. So it's just asking me for permission to create this directory called research. So that has been created, and you can see in the Finder now that research has been created. It's empty right now because we haven't done any research, but that's been done. And now it's going to start creating a bunch of files. So I'll pause here and then return when this is done. I said I would return when it was done, but I just wanted to show you that it's spinning up all of these different research agents. So there's 10, now 11 task agents that are all doing their own thing and then bringing back a bunch of research that it's going to do. And then we're just going to dump them into files. So this really significantly speeds up the process, right? So it says they're running in parallel. Here's what's being researched, and it'll finish when it finishes. Okay, so what we have here is a bunch of research content that Claude has gone out and gotten from the World Wide Web. And you can see, if I bring this down, so for example, case study, social proof, there are 400 lines of a bunch of data. Same thing with company overview, competitive landscape, content strategy, right? So there's a lot of stuff here that we can probably summarize and refine. This sounds good, and I think there's a lot of content here. So we can definitely make this a little bit shorter and a little bit, I guess, summary version of a lot of this content here. For a focused context repository, let's create a separate directory called contexts and start generating files. I think there should be a company markdown file. There should probably be personas subdirectory and individual markdown files in there for the different personas that Anthropic is going after. there should be a products markdown file that has the different products that Anthropic offers. There can be a messaging one around how they message, how they've crafted messaging around their products and product, as well as more zoomed out macro narratives or narrative.md file that talks about the company's orientation around its mission, what it's trying to do, answering sort of like why now, why Anthropic. I think there can be another one called competitive positioning. And there can be another one called channels for the go-to-market channels. And then there can be recent activity, which sort of looks at hiring signals. It looks at recent news. I think that is what I can think of. Am I overlooking anything that we should include as part of the repo, either based on sort of your understanding of what types of contexts are very useful for go-to-market, and or the research that we've done? So I'm bringing Claude into sort of my brainstorming, right? Like, I'm not just telling it what to do. I'm kind of always asking, hey, do you have any other ideas? I don't have to agree with it, but oftentimes I find that Claude is really good at just generating different ideas. And so I like to kind of prompt it to tell me different ideas, and then I shoot most of them down, but it's always helpful. So what I'm doing here is being lazy and telling Claude to sort of draft a template for each of these files, and then I'll go and sort of say, yeah, that looks good, or we should add this or whatever. So we're doing it kind of the opposite way of what I did with the file creation. First, I said, these are the files that I think we need. What else do you think we need? This time I'm saying, hey, you go and generate sort of the template of like what content should go in each of the files, and then I'll give you feedback on that. So kind of depending on how lazy I'm feeling, and also like what's the faster way of accomplishing a task, I'll kind of switch things up there. Okay, so I'm looking at the overview file and company markdown file, at a glance, founding story, leadership team, funding investors, company culture, key milestones. That looks good. Products looks great. And can we double click into Claude Code specifically? Because I think that is, as of January 2026, something that really sets Claude apart, or Anthropic apart, from its competitors. So maybe some of that goes into competitive positioning, but I would like to beef up the section in Claude Code. I think this is good. You're comparing them against LLMs, but again, I think Claude Code, that's something that that's an area that I want to focus on. So when you think about competitors in the coding agent market, you can probably think of companies like Cursor, maybe Gemini, Codex, and then a bunch of like open source or cheaper alternatives, right? So if you need to do research on that, go ahead and do some more research, but let's also pull that in. So the point of this walkthrough isn't to actually get something 100% accurate and precise and awesome. Sorry, it should be accurate, but not like production level, right? It's just to show you how to get this thing going, and I just want to like test Claude Code against it. So I'm skipping a lot of sort of the fine combing that I would do if I was actually going to use this for Anthropic, but we're not right now. So just giving you a taste of like how this works. All right, so it's done. The context repository folder has been created. And as instructed, Claude has created a whole bunch of different contexts. For example, let's look at, I'm actually curious about competitive positioning and see what it says. So you can see that they're looking at sort of the LLM market landscape and LLM competitors, as well as coding agent market landscape. There's Cursor. As directed, there's GitHub Copilot. Gemini, and so on and so forth, right? So I think this is quite good. I mean, obviously, based on just a sort of a quick skim. And now what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to show you that the exact same sort of folder format or the directory format looks exactly the same in here. So now all those files are saved. And now what's, I think, great is that you can start creating, or you can start asking questions against the context, right? So I think what's interesting is, like, if I were to do cold outbound for Anthropic, what are some messaging considerations that I should think about? Like tone characteristics, right? So Anthropic's voice is thoughtful, academic, and cautiously optimistic. Will that work in outbound, or does Claude suggest something else? Like, I'm curious about that, right? And you wouldn't necessarily be able to just ask that question and get sort of a thoughtful response. But now that we have all of this context, we probably can. So I'll say, hey, so I'm tasked with standing up an outbound program for Anthropic, and I need to come up with what the sort of right messaging and specifically what the right voice and tone is for Anthropic. Can we start brainstorming together in terms of what that should look like? So it's asking a bunch of good questions because I probably didn't give it enough context. The audience is everyone that we define in the personas directory, and the goal of the outbound is to is outreach for sales. And I think Anthropic, I don't know. For how I want Anthropic to feel different from competitors, can you actually think about that based on our competitive positioning? We've already done a lot of research on it, right? And there are no existing brand guidelines for this. So you asked me a bunch of questions. I gave it my initial thoughts. And now it's like, okay, well, I got tasked with doing outbound against all the personas. So I'm going to go and read all those files, right? So first is searched because it doesn't know what files exist. So now you have to go and search all of those and then read all those files. And then it's now grabbing some remaining personas, and then it's going to start coming up with some answers. Great. So it's talking about, okay, so what are Anthropic's differentiations or points of differentiation against competitors? Great. Although some of these are just not true, like context window is not best in class, all right, 200,000 tokens, but whatever. For the purposes of this walkthrough, I think that's fine. And then he talks about different voice and tone framework based on the personas and our existing messaging framework for the content on the landing page, right? I think we could continue to iterate on this and then have it like create a specific outbound focused messaging markdown file if we wanted to, right? But I'll stop here because I think the objective of showing you how Claude Code can be super powerful because we're saving these files that are being generated as contexts. How powerful this can be, I think I've at least shown you a glimpse of it, right? Because now I can just tell Claude to like read all these files that we created together, and it's able to root and ground its answers in the context that we created and that we aligned to, right? I gave it a bunch of feedback that we agreed to together, right? And so now I'm able to generate answers and more context, right? Like outbound messaging. That is, again, grounded in the context of Anthropic, which is really great. Whereas if I were to throw this task at Claude non-code, so just like the web interface or ChatGPT, I would have to feed all this context, get maybe a decent answer back, but then all of that context will get lost. But now we have this saved, which is great. Cool. And we'll cover sort of like how to save this context and actually make all of the sort of coordination and operation around context saving even better using Git in a future video. But I think for today, this walkthrough hopefully gave you a taste of what's possible with Claude Code and what more we could potentially do as we start making the system even more sophisticated. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful, and definitely let me know if you have any questions. Cool. Thanks.